Welcome to the Wonder of Stuff podcast, covering science, engineering and technology. From atoms to Android, zirconium to zoology, we'll cover it all here. Well, hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Wonder of Stuff podcast, broadcast every week, this week on a Sunday on Google Hangouts on air. This is the place, and is always the place, where you will find news, information and commentary on science and engineering and technology topics from the past week, beyond, and possibly into the future if we have time travel sorted. Anything else that interests us in outside our tiny little human brains will just drop in when we fancy it. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and to help me out on the journey to knowledge, we have my colleagues of Ross Davison and Richard Smith. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
So, without further ado, let's kick on for the episode 11, and we'll go to Ross for the first one, and SNARC, and the effects in poultry.
Yes.
Tell us what SNARC is.
SNARC, S-N-A-R-C. That is a snappy acronym, and it actually means Spatial-numerical Association of Response Codes.
I knew that, really.
Yeah. Now, what this is basically it's in humans, people naturally respond faster to smaller numbers on the left-hand side and larger numbers on the right-hand side. Now, this is basically observed in most people, and it sort of the SNARC effect is the fact that fact, and it sort of correlates with a number line. If you imagine sort of numbers 1 to 10, and you sort of picture them in front of you, most people picture the numbers going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, they were wondering whether this was like sort of an innate thing in humans. Or whether it was to do with cultural convention. In sort of Arabic countries where you read right to left, people do tend to imagine the number line like that. And it's never been seen in animals before, until now. So basically, scientists in Italy did some experiments with baby chicks. What they did was they showed them two sets of sort of patterns representing numbers, basically numbers of dots. And what they found was if they showed them that, the chicken would go to one side. If they changed the number of dots, if they made it bigger, the next time the chick saw it, they would go to the one on the right. If they made the number smaller, they go to the one on the left. So basically this shows that it's not just in humans, so it's not a cultural thing. It does seem to be a sort of an inbuilt thing. To do with how the brain actually works, and it's sort of like, you know, I was wondering actually whether this would be the same with like handedness. Obviously, you know, handedness, you sort of think, well, most people are right-handed because most people are right-handed. You know, things are built for right-handed people. Left-handed people, it's more awkward, so you know you might learn to use your other hand. So I don't know whether handedness would be something that, you know, where humans are, you know, more likely to be right-handed or left-handed, you know. But yeah, it's an interesting one that they've shown it in chickens now. It's my prerogative to be a bit dense on this one.
Mm-hmm. So when they showed them they showed them patterns of numbers.
Well, it was sort of I watched the video, and basically it was like a sort of a white bit of card. I think they had like some food behind it or something.
Right, with some
white
dots
bit
on.
Of card with numbers of dots on, so 5 dots on both of them. And they'd show it to the chicken, it would go to one of them. Then they changed the number of dots, and they'd make them bigger or smaller. And whether if it was sort of, you know, compared to the previous number, if it was bigger, they went to the right.
So even if they changed the number, because you said there's 2 bits of card with 2 different numbers on.
No, it's the same numbers. It was more sort of whether the numbers.
Oh, I see.
Changed
right. Sorry, I thought there was two sets of numbers. Right. Okay.
In humans, they do experiments with reaction times. So basically, you can sort of have a button, and if you're pressing the button with your left hand, your reaction is faster for lower numbers. And if you're pressing it with the right hand, your reaction is faster for right numbers. And they think that is basically because sort of your brain naturally has this number line. So therefore, if you think of the number line going from left to right, the small number on the left, so you'll react on your left quicker, whereas the numbers on the right are bigger, so the right hand is more suited to doing that.
Well, that's interesting because I've never even heard of SNARC, and I've never even heard of the test and the psychological test to do this. So
it is interesting that it's happening in animals though, because I do know a little bit about handedness, and that's to do with you're right-handed because the majority of the population are minded on the left side, so you're the opposite. So you're left-sided in your brain. But as far as I know, even in the other great apes, the handedness is an even split.
Really?
So I can't remember what it is in humans, but obviously left-handed people are much more rare, as you've alluded to, because everything's built for a right-handed person. Is it 1 in 7? It's something along those lines, though, isn't it? It's quite a big majority right-handed. But yeah, I think even in the primates, last I heard, it's like 50-50 left and right.
Because I mean, is that related to the sort of like the whole thing of the creative and logical side of your brain? Is that even true? Is that like sort of a...
No, I don't think that's true. That gets conflated into that discussion, but I'm not sure there's much evidence about a side of the brain for creative and logical people.
Yeah, I think you'll find that was put around by left-handed people.
But is one side of your brain more suited to motor actions?
I mean, it's areas of the brain, isn't there? So there's a motor cortex sort of area, but it's not that they're all on one side. I mean, obviously, maybe more that link up together that are things that you might consider creative characteristics are more on one side than the other. I guess it could be that, but it's not that we don't have a creative side of the brain, as is often sort of said.
The interesting thing about this, I was chatting to my wife earlier on about what I was going to talk about, and I was talking about that mental number line, and she's the complete opposite. When she pictures a number line, she pictures it from right to left.
Did she speak Arabic?
No, not as far as I know.
Well, but is she left-handed? She's not left-handed though.
No.
So her lower number is on the right-hand side when she pictures it. Oh, interesting.
Which it sort of feels, if you think about it, if you just imagine seeing that, it feels wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So obviously the sort of the standard number line increasing from left to right.
I mean, presumably one lends itself to mathematics better than the other, I guess. In some, in doing quick. Have you heard the example of the Chinese or Asians generally? This thing that Asians are better at maths, or math as the Americans say. Do you know why that is? Do you know the reason that actually is true? Asian people are better at maths.
No.
Do you know, John?
I would have said it was just because they've got a better work ethic.
Well, it is partly that. It is partly that they do come from the agricultural backgrounds do promote that. There's definitely evidence for that. But it's more that that your memories are sort of formed in 3-second clusters, so you can retain a thought for 3 seconds. So when you're doing arithmetic, especially at a young, basic arithmetic at a young age, the speed at which you can remember numbers plays an important role. And the number of, our numbering system is cumbersome. It goes 1, 2, 3, and then 13, 14. It's the teens at the end, and then it switches when you get to 20. It switches the other way around, and so this, it's hard to get your head around in a very short space of time. You have to also always do that sort of checking process. But with Chinese, it's logical, so it goes up. The sound in the right or left being the significant part stays consistent all the way up to the high numbers, and also the sound that you make when you say it in your head, language-wise, is much shorter, so they're able to condense a lot more numbers. That's the reason for it. So it is very intuitive to them when they learn maths and very easy. Yeah. So it has the effect of being A, easier for them, but B, because it's intuitive to you and it feels good to get it right early on, you're getting positive reinforcement, positive feedback. Oh, I understand this from a very early age, and then that compound effect by the time you get to high school, it is massive. But,
So basically, we are being held back by our archaic numbering system.
basically, yeah, and also the English language itself as well. How you pronounce those numbers, because obviously you think in your own language.
Yeah.
If you learned, you would solve the problem by learning Chinese. But the problem is that you normally think in your native tongue, no matter how much you use your sort of secondary language. But if you're able to sort of trick yourself into working the problem out in Chinese, you would find it a lot easier to do.
Yeah, do that. What's that thing called? Code switching. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
And I've seen great videos of this. People who are like fluent in multiple languages can just switch mid-sentence. They'll switch to another language and then switch back again. And it's just like, oh, what?
They do that a hell of a lot in India. I know, and I'm friends with a few people from various parts of India, and they'll start in Hindu, and then they'll flip to English, back to Hindu, constantly throughout the sentence. Yeah. And it's very for somebody who only understands one of those languages, English, it's very disconcerting. You think, well, what the hell are they talking about? Because it's like you'll in every 5 words. You'll only hear one of them. You'll only understand one of them.
You know what it is? As soon as they start talking about you, they're switching away from English. And then when they're finished talking about you, they come back.
But it's not like that. It starts in Hindu for. I mean, some of it is because there isn't a direct translation. I think it's like in Welsh. If you've ever listened to any output from BBC Cymru or S4C. You'll see there'll be some words that are English because there is no translation. Yeah. But for other things, there are perfectly adequate Hindu words for them. But because the English terminology or the English phraseology has been around longer or whatever, then they'll use that.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of the thinking about the number line again as well. Do you think? I imagine the writing from left to right is the dominance in the world. As most people, well, actually.
I would imagine. Well, I'd imagine if the Asians do right to left, then the dominance probably numbers-wise is right to left, is it not?
Is it not? Actually, is it not up and down?
It depends. I think it's split across the globe, isn't it? Western and Eastern. Because of the core, the basis from the language set. I mean, we've got a lot of Latin, which is the way, and as is French, German, all those things. Over in the East, where you've got Thai are all made up of symbols, Chinese, Japanese, all those type of things, Arabic. They start from a completely different set of like rules for grammar and numbering, and I guess that's where the split is. Mm-hmm.
So Ross, the mechanism of action for this. What's the reason that the higher numbers causes a sort of sidedness? Then is it that it becomes a more complicated processing task for the brain, and so then it switches for that reason?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's like I say, it's because you imagine the number line in a certain way, that then has the effect that. Obviously
chickens have no. They're not imagining a number line.
Well, no, but obviously there's a reason why we do imagine it that way.
I was just wondering,
and it's the same
when it's a small number, you can sort of just you can work it out, whereas a big number you're requiring memory to recall it, and then so is that switching the sidedness that one's invoking sort of long-term. That's what I had assumed. One's invoking long-term memory.
Just having a quick look.
You know what the problem is? The big problem is we can't ask the damn chickens.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Can't say, hey guys, how are you working this out?
I assume they've gone as far as, I mean, the fact that they came up with this experiment, they must have had an inkling that this was going to show. So they must have had a hypothesis for the reason.
Well, I think the reason for doing it was to see because I think the assumption was, well, that's how we write. We write left to right. Therefore, that's why we have this number line in this way. And obviously, that then manifests itself in these experiments. And the fact that, like I say, there is a different effect in people who write right to left. But that's why they want to see whether this exists in animals other than humans. Obviously, animals that don't have a writing and don't have a number line, and it does. So I suppose now what they need to work out is it's not. It seems that it's not a cultural thing. It seems to be an innate reaction. So they need to work out what that is. And I mean, all the article I'm looking at here, they're basically just saying that it's a. Yeah, it is just an effect that can be observed and tested, so I don't think they know why it exists.
Yeah, I'm just reading the paper here, and that's saying it's offering attractive arguments for doubting the uniqueness of human numerical cognition. So they really are saying that animals, chickens, have a number line then, effectively.
Yeah. Which, I mean, when you think of it, obviously the concept of numbers of stuff, multiples, there's more of them or there's less of them. You don't have to necessarily know that it, have a concept of mathematics, but it's an innate thing that an animal would think, right, well, there's one seed over there, but there's 10 over there. That's probably a preferred one because there's more of them. So, the idea of magnitude must exist to some extent in animals.
Yeah.
So Richard, do you know if there's been any tests like this with primates? Because that would seem the next step.
Not in terms of SNARC. I know that in terms of handedness and sidedness, that the consensus is 50%. I think some keepers of primates have observed in their populations sidedness occurring in a statistical significant amount, like 60 or 70%. But obviously that's still nowhere near humans, is it? And I've heard before about orcas or pilot whales or a member of that family when they breach, they have a preference to breach on the right side more than the left side amongst the population. So there's some evidence of that. But in terms of the SNARC effect, it seems like something different altogether, really, doesn't it? That's a sort of recognizing numbers rather than a sidedness, isn't it? By the sounds of it, it's the fact that they're opting for a side is immaterial, isn't it? It's got nothing to do with sidedness, has it? It's that well,
don't know, do you? I mean,
it's not that their innate preference for right is making them go right. It's the numbers that are making them go right.
Yeah, it's the magnitude of the number has an effect on their motor control or whatever. At what point it decides to go that way.
I presume they would actually have to have normalised for sidedness in order for the experiment to work. They would have probably had to establish whether chickens had a sidedness first.
Well, I mean,
otherwise that might screw. You know what I mean? If the 60% of the time they went right, regardless, you would have to take that into account, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they put two lots of food on, one on the left side, one on the right side, and showed the chicken any time, does it have a preference to go to the right side anyway?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I assume in the experiments they've done on humans with this that they would have, said, right, well, we'll get right-handed people and left-handed people and see if they act differently. And there's no mention of that, so.
Well, unless your
that mustn't be part of it.
Handedness just doesn't play a role whatsoever, I guess.
Yeah.
And of course we would have to check to see that if the chickens weren't blind in the left eye, which would skew the results somewhat.
Apparently the behaviour begins at about the age of 7 months in humans, this sort of SNARC effect as well.
Wow.
So it's actually an emergent property then. Oh, I guess it would. The computational power you'd need probably would require you to get to that age before you had it, I suppose.
Excellent. That's a cracking topic, because I'm thinking now of follow-ons from that, about the whole of when we were talking about languages being more, the right and left to right and right to left languages. Does that affect things and stuff like that? So I'm thinking of a whole sort of a different topic that we could talk about at a different time. But
this is quite a morbid tangent, but it's always quite interesting, the study of people with brain injuries. That often shines lights on these areas that you didn't expect. It's obviously not great for them, but when they volunteer to be studied and they lose particular abilities because a part of the brain has been damaged, that I believe has helped progress the sort of neuroscience field quite a bit. In seeing the physical structures of the brain being damaged and then resulting in not just as straightforwardly as you think either, because obviously there's some remapping occurs, so the brain actually does remain plastic for your entire life, so there's some remapping happens, so that's you can have interesting effects as well when it becomes more reliant on a new part. An existing part that it becomes more reliant on can completely change someone's behaviour, so it's always quite interesting. But I wonder, in this case, if they're saying that it's, you know, it's kind of an inherent part, I wonder if you could potentially damage and lose the SNARC effect, presumably.
Yeah, that'd be quite interesting. Let's see if it would flip your number line sort of thing.
Cool. Well, it's a good topic, and like I say, that is something that we could probably do an entire episode on all that. But we won't today. But we'll leave it there for now. We're gonna pop over to Richard now. Richard's got I don't know whether it's a big topic, but it's certainly something that's interesting in the news at the moment, and a potential cure for general nut allergies or peanut allergies, and specifically, I don't.
Well, this is specifically peanut allergies, but has implications for allergies generally. This has happened in Melbourne, Australia. It's a study, a randomised control trial. 60 kids have taken part, which includes the placebo-controlled children. And they've been given a fixed dose of a probiotic, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. We'll put it on the bottom of the video. Together with a peanut protein. And I haven't got the numbers in front of us, but I think it was sort of a 70th of a peanut at first, so it was tiny, tiny amounts. Bear in mind, people who are allergic to peanuts can have severe consequences if they do take a full peanut or upwards of that. You know, anaphylactic shock, you can die. But yeah, a 70th of a peanut, and then gradually increasing the amount, which led to 80% of those given the oral treatment being able to tolerate 2 grams or 4 whole peanuts by the end of the experiment, but only 4% of those given the placebo treatment could tolerate them, so it really did work. So obviously the trial now needs to be widened a larger amount, but there's no reason that there's nothing unique about peanut allergy. It's just the most common one. So there's no reason why this couldn't be done with other food allergies. So it's a potential solution, basically.
One of the things that I've always been interested in is, since, I mean, when I was growing up, there didn't seem to be anybody who had peanut allergies, and now there seems to be, you know, every other person that you speak to has, if not a peanut allergy, some other allergy. Is this just a media speak, or has the amount of allergies actually gone up?
I don't know the answer to that, but my gut feeling on all these things seems to be the opposite of what most people's gut feeling seems to be. Most people's gut feeling seems to be we overwash and we over-contaminate, blah, blah. I have a feeling the same as when we've discussed the drugs thing before, is it's probably mostly rates of diagnosis that have gone up, so people are now aware that they're allergic to things. In the past, they wouldn't have been able to have that simple skin prick allergy test that you can now get at a GP's office. That wasn't the case not so long ago.
I mean, you can even get that at a pharmacy now, can't you?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So it's very easy to be diagnosed. I would think that it's mostly that. But
it'd be interesting to see if you could sort of like do an investigation into like unexplained deaths in the past, and find out how many of them ate peanuts. And obviously it wouldn't have been known that was what killed them. But if you looked back and realised, this explained this unexplained death, sort of thing.
It's going to be hard to be conclusive after the fact, I guess.
It would be, yeah.
But I think what I was going to say is that it may be on the increase in the sense that maybe we're exposing our children to foods with allergens in them younger because of the wide availability of foods now, and more knowledge of cooking practices and stuff. Maybe people are more adventurous in what they give to young children, and of course there is, with allergies, there's often a window of opportunity where if you're exposed too early, that's why they actually say don't feed your children solids until 6 months. It's it used to be earlier than that, and you hear a lot of parents saying, "Oh, sod that, I'm giving them it now." But the reason for that is a very good one. It is so that you limit their exposure to allergens that's in the food, because until their immune system's at a level where it can build up the immunity, you don't want them having that.
So is there something like particular about peanuts, like the actual nut that causes an allergic reaction in a lot of people? Or
It's
is
the
it
most
just...
common one, and I guess it's the allergens in the oil, isn't it? So I guess it's going to be the sort of makeup of that of a peanut, isn't it? It's going to be the makeup of the protein in the peanut, the molecular level, that's going to cause the allergy. But I don't know why peanut particularly.
Must be a hell of a thing to have to sort of deal with when you think of, like, any bagged sort of food that's been made in a factory these days will always say may contain nuts, because they're obviously an ingredient in so many things.
I mean, I get mild allergy to hazelnut, but I'm absolutely fine to peanut.
Right.
But I get allergies to quite a few things. Unwashed fruit obviously must be pollen. I'm not sure what it is actually, but I'm assuming it must be pollen or something. But unwashed fruit, if I eat it, I get tingling in my mouth, and hazelnuts is the same. So I just steer clear of them.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, I when I was a child, and to certain extent now, I used to be really bad with hay fever, but that has actually decreased as I've got older. So for all of the people who've now got, it appears that they've got the cases of allergy in general have increased. I've bucked the trend.
Well, perhaps you've done it without knowing the same thing as what this trial is showing, which is, gradual small exposure. It reduces the symptoms over time. Now, it should be said, never ever try that, especially if it's something.
Yeah.
To
be honest, I tried. I tried. There was a thing going around a few years ago whereby, if you gave them, a very similar thing, if you gave somebody a bit of honey, and a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more, but I found out that my pollen that I am allergic to is grass pollen. So I don't know whether that would have the same effect, but I'm definitely much better now than hay fever. And in fact, last year I don't think I got it at all. Which, considering when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, doing all my exams, if I hadn't taken some sort of antihistamine, I would have been I just wouldn't have been able to take them, because the eyes would puff up, it would almost close. I would get a real huge tickle in the back of my throat, and I could hardly swallow. From that to this, and I haven't had any, I haven't had any course of anything really. It's just, I think, naturally just disappeared, or I might have, without knowing it, done something like this test.
Could that be something to do with, like, where you live as well? Like, have you moved far from where you lived when you were 15, 16?
Not well. I've moved to different places around in the intervening years, but actually now I'm not that far at all from where I was, from where I grew up and went to school.
I think part of it is just being older, because they say allergies get better the older you are. Just that cumulatively you've had some allergen exposure and not had unless you have a bad episode with one. But if you manage to avoid that, chances are over time you're going to be better off than at the beginning. That's the reason that you defer contact with the allergen as long as you can, basically.
Yeah, so that whole research was published in the Lancet, and we'll put some details about that on the show notes, which now we have a proper place to put the show notes, thanks to Richard. We now have a blog, which I've been trying to promote for the last 6 episodes, but we have got one now, and it's got some content in it. It'll have even more at the end of this show.
Is it less pink?
Marginally. It still has a certain je ne sais quoi in the pink quotient.
Yeah, it's salmon now. It's the colour of my
salmon. Yes. It's more manly. It's salmon, not
right.
pink.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that again, that's very interesting, Richard. We'll go on to I think it's the last topic of the show, and this is one of mine. I think last week we were talking, amongst other things, about quantum theory, and general consensus was, although Rich, even with with Ross, who has all of the formulae to work out all of this stuff. The general consensus was it's a bit of a mind fuck to get your head around some of the, like the quantum entanglement and the spooky action from, what is it?
A distance.
Spooky action at a distance, that's right. So because we've had a week without talking about it, I thought I'd do some more quantum physics. This one is to do with the wave-particle duality. I mentioned this last week that when I was doing my GCSE exams, this was one of the topics that they put on the end of a syllabus, which is largely Newtonian physics, and it was how a wave, not just light, but other waves can, other particles can be a wave and a photon. No, what am I talking about? It can be a wave and a particle, basically. Anyway, so when I was, yeah, go and tell me.
No, a wavicle. That's what we call them at university.
A wavicle.
A wavicle.
Right. Okay. So anyway, when I was growing up, and I dare say everybody on the vodcast tonight was always told about that the speed of light in a vacuum was constant, and that is if you put it into Google, it'll tell you it's a constant: 299,792,458 meters per second, to be exact. Now, this may change. Because there is a bunch of optical physicists at Glasgow University and Heriot Watt University in Edinburgh. So it's a British thing. They've found that they reckon that the speed of light in a vacuum being constant it's a limit rather than a constant. So that's 299,792,458 meters per second is like a limit, and it might actually change. And what they've done, and I've got a little diagram here. Let me just show you. What they've done is they've set up a race between photons. So let me just share this out. They've got you'll see hopefully you'll see on your screen a little race track and what they have is they've got two photons that they fired off. One went straight through air, and the other one went through a software-controlled two software-controlled liquid crystal devices that they're calling masks. So basically, one of them went straight through, passed through, and ended up at the detector fine. The other one went through the first software-controlled mask, and it changed its structure to a curved beam, and then it went back through another one and changed itself back before it reached its destination. And what they found is that the structure of light matters with the speed and so the shape of the photon. So actually, it actually changed into a, I think it was it's like a, what was it? It changed the shape anyway. And when they took away the masking device, they found that the actual speed of light for the ones that went through the masking device actually still stayed slow. So even though it wasn't being affected, it was slow after that point as well. So they both hit each other. They both hit the detector at different times. So, I mean, the general conclusion to this was that had the structure not mattered, the two photons would have arrived at the same time. The measurements that they took revealed that the structure of light consistently arrived several micrometers later per distance travelled. And now, basically, the optical physicists around the world are basically wetting themselves at this. There was one, but they basically said, well, yeah, it's obvious. I don't know why we didn't see it before.
Well, they would.
So what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, yeah. I mean, I would have questions about that they've done it accurately. Because obviously you're going to be talking about tiny measurements here. So they have to be amazingly accurate. Now, obviously, if you've got a bit of light going through some sort of mask, they are obviously going to have to take into account the speed in that mask, you know what I mean? It's obviously going through a different medium. And also the fact that it's changing its shape. How do they know that it's travelling the exact same distance? Because obviously it's changing shape, it's going to move tangentially as well as straight. So I'd be sort of like interested to see whether this turns out to be one of those ones where it's a side effect of the way they're testing. Because I can't think of any reason why the shape would matter, because obviously if it's going through a vacuum, there's nothing for it to interact with. So it's not like, you know, if you thought of it going through another medium, if you had the shape that was wider than the other one, you know, the resistance through that medium was increased, therefore it slowed down. That would sort of explain it. But in a vacuum, it's not travelling through anything, so the shape shouldn't make a difference. But yeah, I'll have to read up on that. That's a very interesting one. I don't know I wonder what effects. What you could use that effect for. I wonder if that would be sort of like, you know, I think we touched on it before in terms of cryptography, sending light through fibers, and you know, you can, if it's observed, it changes and stuff. I wonder if the different speed of light could be exploited for that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what I was interested in. I just didn't know. I guess from day-to-day stuff, it's not going to affect anybody really, but it will affect people who are, well, measuring light.
Well, I suppose, I mean, if they do find that, you know, the shape of light can have effect on its speed, that could have a massive effect on, you know, if you think of, you know, modern day communications when things are, you know, have to be so accurately timed and stuff. If there was a way of, like, you know, the timing being wrong because of the shape, not just the medium that it's traveling through, it could have an effect. Obviously, you know, it's going to manifest itself over huge distances, for it to actually be any sort of tangible effect. But yeah, I'd be interested in what this behaviour could be exploited for if it is indeed.
Presumably, measuring distances between deep distance objects and ourselves and between each other, we're using light to make some of those measurements, are we? So would that not?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, yeah.
And we're doing that on the assumption of that it's constant.
Yeah. Well, and also that the assumption that space is pretty much a vacuum as well. But yeah, that's it. That's an interesting one. So how did they change the shape again? What was the mask made of? It was like an electronic mask.
It was liquid crystal.
Yeah.
So they could change it with a computer controlled to presumably change that. But I'm looking at various complicated. Actually, does that show you the full? No, there's various other things, and there's various other takes on the whole story, and some of them give you the really complicated maths about it. Mm-hmm. So it's all out there, and we'll put it on the blog. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The speed of light comes up, you know, lots of different discussions and stuff. And yeah, the fact that you mentioned the actual speed of light being a ceiling rather than a definitive speed, you know, that makes sense. In physics, the speed of light being what it is, you can't go faster than it. So.
But when you were doing all your courses, was it always just assumed that it was constant?
Yeah, the speed of light in a vacuum is a universal constant. Yeah.
Right. So that would anything with c, because universal light speed of light is c, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that would affect many calculations.
Well, I don't know whether it would, because obviously it's a constant, and you know, it's the speed of light in a vacuum, and perhaps they just need to modify it to say the speed of light of a normal shaped photon in a vacuum. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they'll just
refine it to be that is the definition.
I think the difference with this test is that they actually were doing it with individual photons, not beams of light, which I think other tests have done it with, you know, beams, and that's why they've never found it before. But just because they were doing the two individual photons and racing them.
Yeah.
That they found this effect.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I did have a little search when you mentioned you talk about this now. I've got an interesting fact about the speed of light. Well, actually, it's not about the speed of light. It's about the definition of a meter. Do you know what the definition of a meter is?
What this is
Is it some object that they keep in a vault in France that tells you this? Or is that the kilogram where it's the definitive?
It used to be sort of SI units used to have a standard, and yeah, they used to have like a, I can't remember what metal it was. There was a certain metal that doesn't expand in heat.
Yeah,
and that's what it used to be.
Models made it more accurate, so they didn't.
Yeah,
yeah.
But the definition of a meter since 1983 is actually the length travelled by light in 1,299,792,458th of a second. So you say the speed of light is in meters per second, where the definition of a meter is based on the speed of light. So it's flipped. Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting that.
So obviously the definition.
We might have to change the definition of a meter.
These things, they seem to be like an infinite regress when you. So the definition of one is the definition of the other is the definition of the other, and it's just
recursive, isn't it?
Well, isn't there one about the weight of a cubic meter of water is a ton or something like that? Is it one of them? I'm sure there's one of those which is.
Yeah, a litre of water is almost exactly a kilogram in weight. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the definitions is that.
Because that's how you know, basically, when you add petrol into your car, you know that it's, if you want to work out how much weight you've added, it's slightly more or less than, I can't remember what it is now, but it's more or less, it's near enough a litre, so it's near enough a kilogram. So if you put 50 litres in, you've near enough added the 50 kilograms of weight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yes, indeed. It's interesting. I was just looking at the formula for calculating a meter, and it does have indeed C in it, C over NF, which is lambda, which is the wavelength of, converts the unit of wavelength lambda to meters.
On the subject of the duality of it and being a particle in a wave, it's something that I don't quite understand, because presumably the classical measurement is a wave, and then that's right, isn't it? And then quantum mechanics discovered the particle duality. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. The classical assumption of light was it was a wave, and all of the observations showed it having wave-like behavior. But it was when the quantum level was being looked at that suddenly you got effects that were like, hold on, it's behaving exactly as if it was a particle.
But it's still behaving like it's a wave in some circumstances, though, isn't it? So it's not.
It has wave-like and particle-like behavior. But this is the thing, it's obviously the sort of the model of atoms and particles and stuff that you learn at school is like this. You've got the nucleus and the electrons around it, and it's all like a solar system. There's this block of stuff. But when you look at the quantum level, it's not actually like that. It's like, it's all fuzzy, basically. And then obviously that fuzziness, wave-like behavior, and can affect in different ways, sort of thing. So particles become wave-like, and vice versa.
Yeah, because these are all actually just approximation. Like you say, the key thing is a model. It's just approximately that, isn't it?
It's a model that works at whatever level. The model of a particle at the macroscopic, it behaves just like a particle. The model of light at the macroscopic behaves just like a wave. But then you go down the quantum level, and that model just doesn't fit observations. But that's why it's called wave-particle duality. It's both. It's a wave and a particle. It just depends on what you're looking at and how you're looking at it, what you're measuring at the time.
When they say it's both, I guess that's where the confusion comes in. It's both as a model to help us comprehend it. In reality, I guess in some way, it's a particle. You know what I mean? It is a particle, and that's part's a fact, and it behaves like a wave for our comprehension, for the purposes of our comprehension. Is that right?
Well, it's both. This is the thing. It's a wave and it's a particle.
Although it would be nice of us to just say that, we're making up the wave bit. But it's not. It is actually. It has the characteristics of it are both.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is a lot of quantum mechanics is like this. That it's both, but for the purposes of our comprehension, it's do you know what I mean? In the sense of, at a mathematics level, it's not required to be a wave, but for our comprehension, not quite in that case. But there's a lot of
for some mathematical formulas, it has to be a wave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like I say, it depends on it's the frame reference. What are you looking at? If you're talking about light going through a room and mirrors and fiber optics and stuff, it's a wave, because then all the wave maths describes what happens. But then if you're looking at the dual slit experiment and this sort of thing, it acts like a particle, so the particle mathematics then works there. So it's whatever the best model for the situation you're looking at it is. Neither of them are right, neither of them are wrong. It's just that one's right in this case, that one's right in this case.
Yeah.
Because they're still trying to come up with this universal thing, aren't they? They try and tie it all together.
Grand unified theory.
That's the one, yeah.
Well, that's actually an interesting thing with physics and science. There's lots of forces that have been sort of combined. Electricity and electromagnetism, and you've got a formula that works for both of them. And there's been other ones, and what they expect to happen is to ultimately have a theory that combines all the forces, the weak, strong, whatever forces, gravity, and all of them together into one singular, probably very, very, very complicated formula that can then be used to describe all of the different forces that you can see and measure. But I haven't found it yet, as far as I know.
Oh, I thought you were going to give us a revelation. I found it last week down the back of the sofa.
Yeah, that's a good example of what I'm getting at. So once we have one elegant formula that describes everything, in my mind, the other formulas become redundant and are just there to help us make sense of, if we want to split off gravity and describe it as an independent thing, we can describe it in this way, in the sense that we can describe a wave in
exactly.
Wave this way. But actually, they're all redundant because we already have an elegant formula.
Well,
that unifies everything and describes everything.
It's one of these things. I wouldn't say they become redundant. They're just accepted for what they are. We've mentioned this before. Things like Newton's laws and the laws of motion. They're perfectly accurate for working out how far this cannonball's going to go if I fire it with this force at this angle. Those formulas, simple formulas, will tell you accurately enough, but they're not right.
Yeah. But they describe our observations.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the observations don't match with quantum mechanics, and therefore.
Exactly. If you were measuring at the quantum scale, they wouldn't work, but we don't. So.
Yeah.
But and also, we may never get this grand unifying theory. Maybe are we trying to look for this big one unifying thing just to mop our fevered brow, because we're still ultimately, even the really, really intelligent quantum physicists are still looking for something where we can just go, phew, and it all works. Look, whew.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like I say, it's things that appear to be completely distinct, forces. They've realized over time, different scientists, different experiments, and theoretical physics and that have realized, this is just another manifestation of that. And the idea of sort of having this grand unified theory is that it would just tie everything together, and it would be like you'd be able to look. They'd be able to have the model to say at the point of the Big Bang, everything existed in this nice state, and then as the universe got older, the different sort of behaviours and forces came out of that, and they can have a sort of an understanding of how the universe became to be as it is now, and that's what they're trying to work out.
So, would you say that they're still trying to ultimately somehow link classical theory to quantum theory?
Not so much classical. I think it's just different. The observations. I mean, I think classical mechanics, has been done and dusted, and we understand it. But the quantum.
But do you not think there's still some something unsettling about there are these two camps, and there's nothing. They're entirely separate.
Well. Not really, no. I mean, I just think it's a different. It's like I say, it's what level are we looking at here?
Well, yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, you can say that, but for the rest of the population, we are probably still looking for something to go, yeah, but if you did that and that, then this bit would work together.
But it's like having behavioural science and the science of biological evolution, isn't it? I mean, the two describe different things. If they say, you could just, like physicists like Brian Cox jokingly say, well, biology is redundant because biology is physics. At some level, obviously, that is true. Yeah. But, there's people who still want to understand biology as a separate discipline. Yeah. And within that discipline, you might only want to understand, you can understand evolution, but it won't tell you about, it won't tell you what a psychologist would be able to tell you about humans. There's levels within it, isn't there, basically? And that I guess if you want an explanation at this level, you look at classical mechanics, and if you want an explanation at this level, you look at quantum mechanics. But to me, it's still true that eventually, surely, the discipline of quantum mechanics makes the other one redundant in the sense that you don't need it to explain the universe. You just need it, like say, to explain how you fire a cannonball from A to B. You just need it to explain the observations you can make, real-world observations that you can make. It's not explaining how the forces work. That quantum mechanics is ultimately going to do that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, the quantum level observations are the most real, shall we say, because you're looking in detail. And the sort of the classical are just the manifestation at a macroscopic scale. That's just how the culmination of all of these quantum effects happens on a big clump of matter, where the tiny observations don't matter because the majority of it we know will move that way. This whole idea of you can't measure exactly where something is and know how fast it's going. Well, you can at a macroscopic level because it's a where is the majority of the mass? That is where the object is. It's not where any of the individual things are. It's just where the majority of the things are there.
So it's always going to be useful. It's always going to have a utility for us to be able to do that calculation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even though actually at a level of explaining the universe, we don't need to do that calculation.
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing that they're just explaining different aspects of the same thing, aren't they? But one's comprehensively explaining everything at a level.
Yeah.
Whereas the other is unable to explain at a level that, at a fundamental level, it falls short ultimately, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it doesn't need to. This is the thing. It does exactly what it's required to do because you don't need to know.
Luckily, but I mean, I guess before we discovered quantum effects, we weren't designing classical mechanics as classical mechanics. We were designing.
Well, we thought that would be it. We thought that would explain everything.
Yeah, to find out the nature of everything.
Yeah.
It's fallen short, and this tool's now. So it's not unnerving in that sense. It's not taking ground from it. It's going into new places that classical could never have gone, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you think of how difficult it must have been for the first scientists to start observing quantum level effects, that's like a complete game changer. That's like, hold on, none of our current understanding explain what we're seeing here. That must have been a bit of a interesting.
I mean, I tell you what, when we're talking about, it strikes me that when we're talking about the quantum effects in biology and evolution, it's going to be great to fill in the gaps that we don't already know. But I tell you what's going to be even more exciting when it overturns some assumptions, which will turn out to be assumptions. What we think is good science, but it will actually presumably, at some point, it's going to conflict with the classical predictions, make better predictions, and we'll have to. And that'll have some sort of real-world implications for people, won't it? That actually, no, this isn't the action of evolution. This is the action of evolution, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, you know what we've done, chaps? We've ended the second consecutive episode with a conversation about quantum mechanics that we can't possibly hope to get any closer to the answer. Maybe this is just a running thing. Yeah. Sorry, I brought that up. Sorry,
people like Einstein and Feynman couldn't get their heads around it with it, investing a whole lifetime into it. I think we've got a little chance.
Three IT guys from the northeast of England winning the Nobel Prize for working it out on a blog and a podcast. Yeah. Well, we just sat there and we talked bollocks for a while and suddenly it all came clear. All right, then. That's brilliant. Right, well, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Ross, again. That was another cracking... It just seems to whiz by nowadays. 45 minutes, well, it's longer now. It's nearly an hour. So, again, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've... we don't seem to be getting many questions in. Okay, I'll rephrase that. We don't seem to be getting any questions in.
Good job of answering them, I think.
But please, just anytime you want. Like I say, there's the my on-screen Twitter handle is there, and everybody's got the Twitter handle. We've also got the email of wonderofstuff@gmail.com, and now, for the first time, we have the blog, which is wonderofstuff.blogspot.co.uk, live in salmon, with the wonderful logo on that Richard did earlier today. And that's where we'll be posting all the show notes from now on with any relevant information and backstories, etc., etc. So please join us, email us, and tell us what you think. But until next time, it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from them.
Goodbye.
Why don't you nick a good catchphrase, John Boy? I'll see you, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.